Breaking news tonight. President Donald Trump has ignited the fiercest political battle of the year by signing an executive order that demands every American voter present government-issued photo identification and eliminates nearly all mail-in ballots. Standing at the White House podium, Trump declared, "This is the biggest step in history to secure our elections. No more fraud, no more games. Only real Americans will vote." Supporters in the East Room erupted into applause, waving flags and chanting his name. But the celebration inside quickly collided with outrage outside. Within hours, Democratic Governor of California, Gavin Newsom, delivered a scathing response that has already gone viral. In a fiery statement broadcast live from Sacramento, Newsom blasted Trump's order as a brazen attempt to silence millions of Americans, particularly the elderly, the poor, and communities of color. His words hit hard. Donald Trump isn't protecting democracy. He's strangling it. He's not fixing a system, he's fixing an outcome. Clips of his remarks spread across social media, racking up millions of views within hours, eclipsing even the president's announcement. Crowds gathered in city squares, holding signs that read, "Let us vote," and "No King in America." For many, Newsom's defiance symbolized a new line of defense against what critics called the most dangerous assault on democracy in modern history. Civil rights groups promised lawsuits, warning that Trump's order would trigger chaos and disenfranchise millions. Analysts on cable news described the clash as the beginning of an unprecedented showdown. Trump, the sitting president wielding executive power, versus Newsom, a rising star determined to stop him. Tonight, America is bracing for a battle that could define its future. Trump insists history will remember him as the savior of elections. Newsom says history will remember him as the man who tried to end them. The fight has begun. The morning after Trump's announcement, Gavin Newsom's speech had already taken on a life of its own. Cable networks replayed his words on a loop, while clips of his fiery statement surged across TikTok, YouTube, and X, collecting millions of views. Headlines screamed, "Newsom versus Trump, democracy on trial." For the first time in years, it appeared that Trump's dominance of the national conversation had met a true rival. Newsom sharpened his message during a televised interview, declaring, "This is not about fraud. This is about fear. Donald Trump fears voters, so he wants to eliminate them. He fears democracy, so he tries to strangle it." The host sat stunned as Newsom went further, comparing Trump's order to the tactics of leaders in Hungary, Turkey, and even Russia. "We fought wars to stop this kind of authoritarianism abroad," Newsom warned. "Now, we're fighting it at home." The language was explosive, and it worked. Supporters flooded the streets of California with signs calling Newsom the people's governor and chanting his name alongside slogans of resistance. Even late-night comedians jumped in, turning Trump's order into a punchline, while praising Newsom's fiery response as the soundbite of the year. But what made the moment extraordinary was not just the reaction at home. International outlets from the BBC to Al Jazeera picked up the story, framing Newsom as a rising figure in global politics. Analysts said the confrontation could position him as the Democratic Party's standard-bearer against Trump. Donald Trump did not remain silent for long. Within hours of Gavin Newsom's viral takedown, the president unleashed a torrent of posts across his social media platform. "Newsom is a failed governor," he wrote in one, calling California a disaster of crime, drugs, and homelessness. In another, he mocked Newsom's ambitions, writing, "He's only attacking me because he wants to run for president." Sad. The posts were punctuated with capital letters, exclamation marks, and accusations of fake news designed to rally his base. At a rally in Florida, Trump turned the spotlight directly on Newsom. Before thousands of cheering supporters, he painted the California governor as a hypocrite. "This guy lectures me about democracy, but look at his state. It's falling apart. If Gavin Newsom ran the country, we'd all be living in tents and chaos." The crowd roared, chanting, "Lock him up," as Trump smirked from the podium. His performance was classic Trump. Part showman, part fighter, and entirely unrelenting. But while the rally energized his supporters, it also backfired. Newsom's team clipped the footage of Trump's attacks and turned it into viral content, framing the president as desperate and unhinged. The contrast between Trump's loud insults and Newsom's calm but sharp rebuttals played perfectly on television. One analyst noted, "Every time Trump attacks Newsom, he makes him bigger. He's turning his rival into a national figure." Even Republicans began to worry privately. Some strategists whispered that Trump's fixation on Newsom risked elevating him into the role of the Democratic Trump, a figure who could dominate media cycles and rally opposition like no other. Meanwhile, Democrats rallied behind Newsom, sensing that his feud with Trump was becoming a central narrative of American politics. The clash had escalated from policy disagreement into a personal duel. And in America's fractured media landscape, personal duels meant ratings, clicks, and attention. Trump had declared war on Newsom, but in doing so, he may have created his most dangerous opponent yet. Across the country, the clash between Donald Trump and Gavin Newsom was no longer just a political debate. It had become a cultural war. In diners and barbershops, church pews and college campuses, Americans found themselves on opposite sides of a growing divide. For Trump's supporters, the executive order was a triumph of strength, a defense against what they saw as decades of fraud and manipulation. For Newsom's backers, it was an existential threat, proof that democracy itself was under siege. In the Midwest, Trump loyalists gathered at town halls waving signs that read, "Secure our elections," and ID or no vote. They argued that if people needed identification to buy alcohol or board a plane, they should need one to vote. Local radio hosts echoed the sentiment, declaring that Newsom's outrage was proof that Democrats feared losing their grip on power. But in cities from Los Angeles to Philadelphia, protests surged with equal force. Marchers carried placards reading, "Democracy denied," and "No King in America," chanting Newsom's name alongside calls to defend the vote. Civil rights groups organized rallies outside courthouses, framing the battle as a continuation of the fight that had defined America since the Civil Rights Movement. "This is Selma all over again," one activist told a crowd in Atlanta. "The faces have changed, but the struggle is the same." News networks captured the polarity with split screens. On one side, Trump's rallies filled with red hats and chants. On the other, Newsom's supporters chanting beneath blue banners of resistance. Polls reflected the division. Roughly half the country said they supported Trump's order, while nearly as many opposed it, leaving America in a deadlock that seemed impossible to break. Jasmine Crockett added fuel to the fire with her own remarks. "This is not just Trump versus Newsom. This is Trump versus the people." Her words further electrified opposition and sharpened the sense that the nation was living through a turning point. As the standoff between Trump and Newsom intensified, a new voice entered the fray, one that had already proven itself unafraid of confrontation: Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett. Known for her fiery speeches and sharp wit, Crockett took to the House floor and unleashed a scathing attack that echoed far beyond Washington. "Donald Trump doesn't want secure elections," she declared. "He wants controlled elections. He wants power concentrated in his hands and silence forced on yours. And when leaders like Gavin Newsom stand up to him, he calls them enemies. But the real enemy is tyranny, and Trump is embracing it. The chamber erupted in both applause and outrage. Republicans jeered while Democrats rallied, many rising to their feet in support. Clips of Crockett's remarks spread like wildfire online, quickly trending alongside Newsom's earlier speech. Together, their voices formed a chorus of resistance that framed Trump not as a defender of democracy, but as its destroyer. Outside the Capitol, Crockett joined Newsom at a rally, the two standing shoulder to shoulder before thousands of cheering supporters. Their joint appearance was broadcast live on national television, with commentators calling it the birth of a new Democratic alliance. Newsom praised Crockett as a fearless truth-teller, while Crockett called Newsom a partner in the fight for America's soul. The crowd chanted their names in unison, the sound carrying across the city like a declaration of war. Trump, furious at the growing alliance, lashed out again online. "Newsom and Crockett are frauds," he wrote. "They don't care about you. They only care about their power." But the more he attacked, the more the opposition grew. Hashtags like hashtag Crockett versus Trump and hashtag Newsom Strong began trending, painting the conflict as a three-way battle. Trump the incumbent, Newsom the challenger, and Crockett the insurgent fighter who gave the movement its sharpest edge. The dynamic had shifted. Trump was no longer facing one rival. He was facing two, united by defiance and powered by a nation on edge. As protests raged across the nation, rumors began to swirl that shook Americans to their core. Unverified posts on social media claimed Trump was considering postponing the next election altogether. Anonymous insiders whispered that federal agencies had been ordered to prepare contingency plans. The White House denied everything, yet the silence from Trump himself fueled speculation. For many, the possibility no longer seemed unthinkable. Cable news networks filled the airwaves with theories. Some analysts argued that Trump's executive order was only the first step toward consolidating absolute power. Others suggested he might use the National Guard to enforce voting restrictions, transforming polling places into militarized zones. Grainy photos of armored vehicles moving through cities spread online, sparking panic, even when later debunked. The nation was drowning in a flood of uncertainty, where fear often outweighed facts. On the streets, the tension boiled over. In Chicago and Atlanta, police clashed with demonstrators demanding that elections proceed as scheduled. In rural towns, Trump supporters organized counter-rallies, framing the opposition as anarchists trying to destroy the country. Violence erupted in scattered incidents, and governors pleaded for calm. Yet the sense of crisis only deepened. Gavin Newsom seized the moment, delivering a somber address. When people no longer believe their votes will count, democracy collapses. That is the precipice we now face. And let's be clear, Donald Trump's order is not about protection, it is about power. His warning was carried live on every major network, striking fear and resolve into millions watching at home. Jasmine Crockett added her own fire. The people will not be silenced. Not by executive orders, not by fear, and not by a wannabe king in the White House. Together, their words turned the growing resistance into something larger, a movement that felt unstoppable. The firestorm had arrived. What began as an order about voter ID had evolved into the greatest test of American democracy in generations. And the rumors of canceled elections made one thing clear: the final showdown was near. The nation held its breath as tens of thousands gathered on the National Mall for what was billed as the largest demonstration since the Civil Rights era. Banners stretched high above the crowd. Democracy belongs to the people. No king in America, and let us vote. The air pulsed with chants, drums, and the hum of anticipation. At the center of it all stood Gavin Newsom and Jasmine Crockett, side by side, prepared to deliver the message that had drawn the country to this moment. Newsom spoke first, his voice echoing across the sea of faces. Donald Trump believes elections belong to him. He thinks he can dictate who votes and who does not. But America is not his business deal. It is our shared promise, and no executive order can take that away. The crowd erupted, waving flags, stomping their feet, roaring in unison. Then Crockett stepped forward, fiery as ever. Trump wants statues and history books. He wants to be remembered as the man who changed everything. But the truth is, he will be remembered as the man who tried to steal your voice. And we will remember the people, the mothers, the workers, the veterans, the students, who stood up and said, "Enough." Her words hit like thunder, rolling across the crowd and through every television broadcasting the event. Together, they raised their hands, a gesture of defiance and unity. Drone shots captured the moment, a mass of citizens stretching for miles, shouting one message in perfect sync: "Our vote, our power." Commentators on every channel called it the defining image of the era, the moment America chose resistance over submission.